Welcome to Emerging with Jamal Robinson, a podcast where you hear from the diverse voices behind emerging technologies and gain useful insights for positive changes in your life and career. On today's show, I speak with André Bearfield. What is your dream job?
I want to play music. I want to write music every day, and I want that to be able to take care of my family.
What do people admire or appreciate the most about you?
Consistency, showing up, try to do what I say I'm going to do.
What are you most proud of?
I have a son, 2.5 years old. Most proud to be his dad, of all the things. I've been working on music since I was 7 years old. I'm very proud to still be working on music after all these years.
3 months, all expense paid travel. Where are you going?
Africa, showing up in Ghana. I'm going to hang out on the Ivory Coast, Cameroon, drop down South Africa, on the continent of Africa, though. That's where I spend those 3 months, no doubt.
Favorite music, artist, song, and album?
The neo-soul movement of 1998 through 2001, when the Soul Aquarians, you got D'Angelo, you got Jay Dilla, you got Mama's Gun comes out from Erica. That's my favorite thing that happened in music in my lifetime, for sure. Favorite album of all time is D'Angelo's Voodoo, came out in 1999. Some of the best sonics I've ever heard on a vinyl record. And my favorite song, if there's a such thing as a favorite song of all time, is actually Sly and the Family Stone has this record called Time.
Man, my favorite album, Brown Sugar by D'Angelo. So
okay, 95, okay.
Definitely there with you. That's what's up. Favorite book or author?
Favorite author, I'd have to say, is Haruki Murakami. My favorite book by him is Kafka on the Shore. He's a Japanese writer, right? I don't know how they translate it, but it is an ethereal, magical space.
If you can meet anyone throughout history, dead or alive, who would that be?
Prince. People always say he floats, he doesn't walk, and there's just so much mystery and magic around that person. And obviously, he's one of the most prolific musicians in the history of the world, as far as we know. I would love to hang out in his purple kingdom, bro.
What is the last meal you'd want to eat?
My wife is a chef. She makes this, French dish called beef bourguignon. That stuff is crazy, bro. It's deep, amazing noodle, European kind of thing. So I love it. But honestly, bro, tacos, I'll eat some tacos every day, So the end meal could be some tacos.
André is a Senior Director of Product Strategy at DigitalOcean, driving the strategic direction for their product portfolio. He shares his experience joining DO and contributing to their growth from a 200-person pre-IPO startup to a post-IPO enterprise with over 1,500 people on staff. André also shares his prior experience leading product at large enterprises like IBM and startups like BlueBox and Digital Forest. André is equally talented in the music studio as he is the boardroom. We discuss his love for music, which started at the age of 7, and how his passion for music has been a stabilizing force, has provided him a sense of community, and has been an accelerator for his professional career. I know you're going to enjoy the conversation with André today. Let's get on to the show. Hey, welcome to the show. If you can start off giving your full name, current employer, job title, your role, and time in role.
Hey, thank you for having me. My name is André Bearfield. I'm currently employed with DigitalOcean. You can check us out on the New York Stock Exchange at DOCN. My current job title is Senior Director of Product Strategy.
Maybe for people that aren't familiar with DigitalOcean, can you just give an understanding of what DigitalOcean is? Who are your customers? You'd mentioned cloud, just helping people understand.
Of course. Hey, DigitalOcean is a pure play cloud service provider. We deliver infrastructure, platform, and software services with the intent to empower digital product builders to get their ideas from initial concept all the way to production in as short of time as possible. That core customer segment is the pre-enterprise, which is folks that are developers, often overlooked individuals, developers, startups, and SMB segments.
Can you explain the SMB segment more and then provide the acronym?
Yeah, so SMB stands for small, medium-sized businesses. But generally speaking, SMB can be considered businesses that are less than 1,000 employees.
Okay, that's really good context. I would imagine under 1,000 employees gives you the opportunity to have really intimate relationships with these customers. If we can transition into your product strategy role and you can kind of help us understand. Senior Director of Product Strategy, title kind of speaks for itself, but I would imagine there's a lot of things that people don't know that you do. So if you can kind of explain that role a little bit and what you do on a day-to-day, quarterly, annual basis.
Yeah, that's a good question. What do I do? So in product strategy, what we try to do is think about the future of the company, looking out over Hill 2 and Hill 3. So still focused on the core product management functions, thinking about new products, new opportunities, business differentiation, et cetera. But then thinking out 18 to 36 months into the future and trying to figure out what is the vision for what we can become? What sort of tactics can we take today to put us on the appropriate path to accomplish that? There's also another element where we move from a product management perspective, where you move from growing the business from an organic lens to more of an inorganic lens. So you start to think about how you leverage channel partners and M&A as tools and levers to grow the business.
One of the questions that popped up for me almost immediately as you were talking about the 18 to 36 month, a lot of times in strategy, there's a thought around thinking forward to the future, but then there's the, let's say, contrast of people focusing on like quarterly results. How do you manage that and think through that as a product strategist?
Yeah, so my team, one of the things that we do, there's multitude of things we're trying to figure out how to do. But one of those things is trying to increase the success outcomes for existing product teams, right? So we might run ahead of what is listed on a product roadmap. So my team is a matrix team that includes some product designers, some senior product managers, as well as some senior engineers. And so we will run ahead and we will try to make sure that we really understand the problems that we're targeting in the coming quarters. We understand what those outcomes are. We try to demystify concepts that might be mysterious. We just try to provide insights to the teams, to the delivery teams, to make sure that there's higher fidelity of understanding going in. So on a quarterly basis, there's some blend of looking out into the future, doing a bunch of research. But then there's also some investigating what's next on the shorter term roadmap to see how we can contribute some fidelity back to the business to improve the likelihood of attaining those target outcomes.
Very thorough answer. I appreciate that. I know you've had experience with multiple companies in a product strategy role. Would you say that what you explained is kind of consistent with most companies, or does it differentiate depending on the industry you're in? Just help us understand more.
Yeah, so I'd say I have only worked in product strategy at DO. I worked in product management across many other companies, and I would argue that product generally, that product management, product marketing, product strategy certainly is something that has to be fit to the organization within the structure of the broader corporate strategy or the vision of the business. So I think those roles and the functions are certainly unique given the context of each company I've worked for.
When I was thinking of strategy, and you're talking about 18 to 36 months, to some degree, you're predicting the future. So I'm just curious, what kind of skill sets are required to be able to like step into a role like yours, or even worked in some of these matrixed functions that work around you?
Yeah, product management is a function that is one thing that is really innate to the function is working cross-functional and building matrix teams that normally you don't own, right? But you kind of try to facilitate leadership in that context. So being in product strategy and actually having a dedicated team is kind of like an elevation of that construct. When you think about the future of a business and you're trying to sow into the soil of the business, find insight, right? Trying to improve the capability of the business to make better investment decisions faster is one way to think about it, right? So you really want to have that business mind, the folks thinking about the business. What's the structure of the value chain between the customer and the business? What do you need to actually facilitate technically how to accomplish those values? So you need that engineering leadership. But then you also need to connect the business value, the customer value, the technology together with the user experience that's attractive, that's magnetic, that's delightful to the end user. And so that's the reason why we have that product management role, we have that engineering role, and then we have senior designers core to our group.
That sounds like a pretty solid team of personas. Would you say that if someone was in one of those individual roles, it'd be beneficial to kind of branch out now and get more exposure to some of the other roles, because that makes them a stronger engineer or UI UX designer in the future? And if that answer is yes, then how do they get that exposure?
Product managers, engineers, and designers working in this space, it is different for sure, right? So it's not for everybody because as a product manager, as an engineer, we're no longer delivering product. We're not a delivery team anymore. And so we're doing the research, the education, business case development. We're doing feasibility assessment, architecture, initial designs. And then we hand that stuff back to the business, try to get investment for those things, and we hand it to delivery teams. And so some engineers want to commit the code, want to create something that they own over time. Product managers often feel the same way. They come up with an idea or they facilitate that brainstorming context and come up with something. And then you want to build it, and then you want to own, and you want to nurture it. And then designers also want to own the experience over time often. And so this is different. Specifically looking into the future and imagining what could be and focusing on improving the business's capability of making decisions is a different sort of mindset. And it takes a lot of more flexibility, and there's a lot of ambiguity involved, right? So that knowing what's going to happen tomorrow or knowing what to expect next week, we are not operating in that space. We're constantly in the question and opportunity space and trying to unravel those questions to come up with a vision and a rationale about what we're going to do in the future.
You made that seem much more like formulaic and like there's a process. I used to just think it's magic and people sat back there and just made some stuff up and read something on the internet. Or you threw things at a dartboard and whatever the dart got closest to is what you made the investment in.
Hey, I'm not trying to say that throwing the dart wouldn't be equally valuable to what we end up getting. So maybe we should throw a dart, bruh.
Some kind of hybrid system.
For real.
So you had mentioned that engineering, PM, UI, UX, you all essentially come together with the strategy. You present it to the rest of the business, but you can't really own that. What I heard you not say is like you all also have to go out to the business and kind of sell them on some of these things, right? Can you maybe speak to that portion of the role?
Basically, on a quarterly basis, we come in and we assess some sort of priority of potential opportunities. And so part of the quarterly work is what are the upcoming opportunities? What are we going to investigate next? Obviously, our team is not of infinite size, so there's a scoped set of things we can even investigate and research in a given quarter, and we try to scope our work to some sort of investigations with the outcome of pulling together a library of intelligence, really, with some major milestones that we will turn into business cases to pitch to the product and corporate leadership. And so that's just something that happens on a quarterly basis. As a leader, my hope is always to facilitate visibility for my team. Obviously, I can operate in those spaces, but I'm really interested in the PMs on my team, on the engineers on my team, and the designers to have that space to make the pitch with my support. And so that's one of the things that's really core to me, is trying to build that leadership and have them feel like they own more than investigating a technology, but also own the voice of what goes back to the leadership. So that's also something that I strive to create.
And actually, as you say, own the voice, I think of communication skills. These are skills that aren't always associated with like an engineering role or a software development role. Are these things that you like nurture on the team? And how could people, one, from a leadership perspective, nurture that on their teams? But then also for the individual, how do they get better at this?
Well, this is what we ask for. Like when I was bringing these people together for this team, on the engineering side, I'm specifically looking for people who are interested in the vision side and architecture side. And specifically, the challenge is you're going to have to own these things. This needs to belong to you. That's something that I went in our weekly time together, which I spend with all of my team members. That's what we talk about. We talk about what it means to be a leader. How do you show up? Who's going to be in the room? How do you prepare? We're constantly pitching ideas to each other. There's something that's a bit nascent in this team, which is that design is embedded soup to nuts, end to end. That creates a situation where we get to pitch to each other and in a time frame, like in a context that's kind of unique for the company, in the history of this specific company. So we're constantly pitching, we're constantly presenting ideas to each other. We're writing papers and presenting papers within team. And so my thought is by gaining comfort in doing that and representing your ideas and having those challenging conversations, we use tools like a rude Q&A. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but basically what that means is we throw darts at the ideas. We do a straw man and we rudely Q&A, because that prepares you for what often happens in an executive context, when in some ways the job can be, let me tear this idea down to make sure it holds water. So we work through those processes in team so that when it comes to end of quarter, we're prepared to stand strong, right?
As a leader, you set up the environment where your team gets skill in-house doing these things with each other, and then that builds up their skills. And when they have to go out and speak with other executives or business leaders, they already have the experience and the confidence, which is really great.
Yes.
But then also, I'm assuming that your team takes these opportunities in-house with each other very serious, and then they show up as if they're presenting to those executives, so they get the most out of it too. I typically have been inviting my friends and people that I know on the show like you. I guess I know too many business development people because as you're talking, product strategy, it sounds almost exactly like business development. So do you have any thoughts on like the difference between those two, or like is your role something that people need a product background or a business development background? How do you think about that?
This is into the stratosphere of corporate development, business development is the strategy piece. So certainly my role is more on that side. I sit right next to the VP Corp Dev. And so they're focused on the searching and farming out of potential M&A targets and partners. And then we in my team bring the intelligence to make sure that we are de-risking that space, right? Because being a business development person, it's you don't have to be technical to be good at business development. But when you're operating in a very technical space like the cloud, you really need to have that handshake to make sure that there's some like feasibility layer. From the skilling perspective, I'd say my role is very similar to what you are doing. I don't know a lot about what you're doing. Like, I'm not sure if you guys are...
It's similar. Very similar.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to start calling myself a product strategist.
Okay, great. And maybe I should start calling myself BD. I'm king of BD.
That's what I call myself after I get off work. Put it in your title on LinkedIn.
Cool.
So especially at this time, there's a lot of people that are actively looking for work. I'm curious, how did you get your role? And how did you feel comfortable taking the role, as I'm sure you had a lot of opportunities?
I grew into this role at DO. I've been here for over 5 years. I started building out a product portfolio at DigitalOcean, and that product portfolio grew from 0 to 4 individual product lines. I was promoted to manage a team of product managers that included management of that portfolio as well as the broader storage portfolio in DigitalOcean. And then about 1.5 years after I was managing those portfolios of product, I was given the tremendous opportunity to dip my feet into a new area that's nascent at this company, but very necessary for this company as a business that went public, just a couple years ago. And now we're having to do this thing that we didn't have to do in the past, which is speak intelligently about the future, make commitments to the street that we hold, that we stick to. And so you really need people looking ahead and trying to understand and providing valid, rational, thought about the future. So I kind of grew into this role over time and having a number of successes here and a number of failures here leading to this role over time.
I'd love to hear maybe one of the successes you'd want to share and one of the failures.
It's both. I'll say first portfolio of products that I built at DO is the managed databases portfolio, right? That business was 0, right? I mean, I came in and I delivered the business case from 0 to 1, right? And so that was $0 of revenue, and it will be in 1 year around 10% of total revenue at this company, which is a huge success. One of the fastest growing products, not the fastest one, there are still others. The Kubernetes portfolio has also grown very quickly, right? But one of the fastest growing products at this company. So I would consider that a success, and it's been a ride in which I've learned a tremendous amount, and I continue to learn today. On that route to that nearly 10%, of total revenue, there's been some failures. Like, every time you run end-to-end product delivery process, you realize at launch, all the things that you didn't see ahead of time, right? And obviously the hope is to narrow the number of misses every time you get through, but it's just part of the process where you miss things and you realize there's value you left on the table, or you realize there's like clear issues or with communication, with documentation, et cetera, right? So, but there's also some of these business cases have been explosive, but then 1 or 2 of these business cases have been real misses, right? Have been overestimations. And so, my philosophy about my humanity, the way I engage with my life, with my family, with my career, with my side hustles, as you would, is that you gotta fail to win. I look for the issues. I'm looking for the mistakes, because I think in the mistake is where you find all the evidence of what it takes to be successful. And so I think that positive mindset is what keeps me going. But I think it's also critical, especially in corporate America, when you see failure, when you make a mistake, not to think you're a failure, but to just realize, hey, this is the opportunity space. This is where I can identify the ways to win, is when I made a miss, right?
You're separating the failed action from the individual, and you're not putting it on you. And you're saying, hey, these are activities that weren't successful, but what can I learn from them? And then just turning that into further success in the future. And this is a wise approach. How do you get to that point? Because I mean, intellectually, I think a lot of people will grasp that, but emotionally is where you get to that wall. And then the fear steps in, and then you're like, you know what? Let me just get out of here. Let me quit the company, or let me bow gracefully, or let me not try this thing, because I don't want to risk the failure. So how did you get to this place? Is this through reading books? Is this through yoga? Is this through like a social support system? All of the above, or something else?
A couple things. First one is, I did not get to this point, right? I didn't arrive. I'm not done, because those things you describe, like, I'm going to leave this place. This didn't go well. I feel bad. Do I belong here? Am I capable of doing this? I always experience those feelings. It's not about not feeling them, because I encounter them. But the question I always ask myself is, what am I willing to do about it? Quitting is something I have to do for me. And if I decide I don't want to do it, then I won't do it. But if I'm thinking about quitting because I'm embarrassed, or because I feel like I can't do it, or I made a mistake. You know, when I was reading when I was 6 years old in front of my cousins, I felt embarrassed because I wasn't good at reading in front of people yet, right? And I feel like now, after going through a bunch of this stuff, right, is when you feel uncomfortable, when you didn't do it exactly right, when you didn't hit it exactly how you imagined, that is the learning space. Feeling the discomfort is how you know something is changing. Something needs to change, and something is changing. And so I try to remember, and the more I practice returning to focusing on the work, the more quickly I remember I need to do it, but I still go through that journey's still there, where it's like, I feel bad, and what do I do now, right? And so I think arriving, I don't want to make people feel like you're going to arrive at the situation. You're not going to feel that feeling. You're probably going to feel it. But the question is, what will you do? There's this one book that I read that really did help me a lot. It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck, a researcher and professor. And she wrote this book called Mindset, and it's very repetitive, and it's self-helpy. But one of the things that it really unlocked for me is it helped me realize that I was viewing my success as if it were based on some innate capabilities that I have. And when I failed, I would assume I failed because I did not innately have the capability. I was not smart enough. I wasn't meant to do it. And it helped me open that aperture and realize that everything I actually have, every success I've had, is through challenges, and I built a capability to do things. And so the way to judge yourself isn't on whether you naturally did anything. It's what you were willing to do to get what you wanted to get. And so when I don't make it, the question I have for myself is, what am I willing to do now to get the thing I want to get? That book is great, by the way. So if you haven't checked it, check that.
I will drop it in the show notes, and hopefully she's going to give us that 10%. It sounds like you've tapped into the universal issue that a lot of us have, the lack of ability to be present with our emotions and sit in discomfort.
For real.
I really appreciate that you're grounded and you're able to recognize these things. How do you pass this on to your team?
I think reading together is the best way to coach and share, especially philosophical concepts with the team, right? And so one of my teammates, one of my team members actually put together it's currently called a product book club. And one of the things we do is there's a monthly book that the team reads and discusses together. And so I think that's a strategy that can certainly work.
You sound like a very cool manager. Let me come work for you. Book clubs and emotional intelligence. You seem like you're well versed on this space, but obviously things change every day. And how do you stay up to date on the latest? Make sure you're kind of at the leading edge, but then you can also like lead your team and challenge them to be their best selves.
That's a good question. My role and the role of strategy is one that is real steeped in research, right? And so in some ways, it's part of my job to read and work with analyst firms and understand what's going on and look into a bunch of companies to understand what they're doing and what the potential competitive advantage or levers for advantage might be. And so in some ways, it's just daily research, but I would say there are some things that I check out. Obviously, Harvard Business Review is something that I check out. MIT has this great newsletter called Thinking Forward. And they talk about technology. They talk about business. It's great. So that on the tech side, on the M&A side and the investor side, which is also kind of a part of the role, I obviously am checking out TechCrunch locally to Seattle. I'm looking at Crunchbase, obviously. And I actually have an ex-colleague of mine, someone that I worked together with at DO for many years. His name is John Gannon. He recently launched a very useful, informative newsletter called VC Deals. You can check it out on LinkedIn. And he's talking about weekly what deals have happened. He talks about the VC industry. He talks about compensation for people who are analysts in venture capital, et cetera. And that's always interesting to check out.
These are very helpful sources. I'll make sure that we throw them in the show notes. Now, if we can maybe pivot away from DigitalOcean and think about all the things that happened up until DigitalOcean, which is originally where we met each other. Although you didn't remember me, I'm not going to hold that to you. You've worked at some other pretty big tech companies, but you've also worked at startups. Can you give your experience? Let's even start at college, the degrees you had and then the trajectory that brought you to DO.
For sure. My degree is in biochemistry. I was interested in going to medical school and being a doctor when I was in school. Up until third year, junior year, midway through junior year, I'm like, I don't want to go to the hospital every day, And so I started thinking about what else I could possibly do. I was a technical person, at least in the context of my community. And I gained that technical aptitude through trying to make music in the 90s on computers. And so my way into tech actually started when I was a young teenager. But when I came to the end of school, I decided that technology was a huge opportunity for me. This is 2005. And I wasn't prepared to determine an industry. And I thought about technology as not an industry, but as a platform that could be an inlet to any industry. And so I started to pursue technology after college because I wasn't prepared to decide what industry. And I figure gaining skills in technology would be useful whatever I determined to do later.
How did that thought process manifest for you after college across your first couple of roles?
I'm born and raised in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I moved to Seattle about a year after graduating in order to work in technology. And I almost immediately got my first tech job working at a data center where I was doing account management and program management for the first couple years, working with customers, learning what was going on, seeing some opportunities where they were having some failures, and I developed a couple businesses within that business. That company was called Digital Forest. We were doing some web development for some of our customers, which is a business that I ran. And then I also investigated some potential opportunities in the HIPAA and PCI space for the company. That business was acquired by Institutional Capital in 2011 or 12. And one of our customers, BlueBox, which was founded by Jesse Proudman, called me almost immediately saying it was someone that I had known, and he happened to be one of our customers, reached out, and I was able to join that startup very soon after. This company was focused on providing infrastructure as a service, so VPS, but also dedicated hardware, focused almost primarily on Ruby on Rails developers. And when I started that business, I was working as a leader for the support and implementations group. So that's the folks that supported our customers and that delivered services for our customers. I spent about 9 months in that role. And I, again, had an opportunity to identify a bunch of critical core issues that were limiting our growth as a business, and had the opportunity to step into the first product manager role at that startup.
So you just showed up, did what you thought made sense. Somebody recognized and put you in the role, gave you the opportunity, and that's really great. And then maybe just going through the rest of the journey. So you had BlueBox. I'm looking now. BlueBox looks like an IBM company. Help us understand the trajectory from there.
Yeah, so BlueBox, when we launched this BlueBox Cloud, which was a OpenStack-based infrastructure as a service technology and a portfolio of products associated with it, it became about 35% of our revenue in about 18 months. and naturally IBM playing in the cloud space, also leaning into open source around this time frame, came to the table, and IBM ultimately acquired the BlueBox business in summer of 2015.
Are you super rich now? When they acquired the company, you were there, you had the stock, and that's when you got the 100 million.
So listen, I am not super rich, but them handcuffs was golden.
Okay. Oh man, I can imagine.
Yeah,
and that's where we met, when you had the golden handcuffs. That's probably why you don't remember me.
yeah. I mean, that was a time of my life. Well, that was the first time of my life, I guess. And then so I was running the integration on the product side for the IBM acquisition for a number of years, and then I also ran the first major partner engagement on the cloud side between IBM and Red Hat. There was no acquisition in the thinking or discussion at that time, but we did do a hyper-converged united delivery of the BlueBox cloud technology on IBM paper using Red Hat software as a core. And then as soon as the handcuffs came off, 2017, I was outie. Because things were not moving quickly enough for me at IBM. I like the flow and speed of the startup space. And so I took the opportunity to look out to see what was out there. And I joined DigitalOcean in 2017. There were 200 of us when I joined. There's 1,500 people here now. We were a private company at the time. We IPO'd DOCN, New York Stock Exchange, in 2021.
Man, multiple acquisitions, one IPO. I'm going to need you to let me hold something. I know you're a rich guy, so we're going to talk about that offline. But getting back to your career, how do you make the determination when it's time to leave for a role or look for something new?
As we talked about, how I got into product is kind of me doing what I thought was right and finding a way into a job role that came into value over the course of the last decade or so, right? But people weren't talking much about product management in the aughts. So in some ways, there's some fortune in there. In the last 10 years or so, I want to be really deeply engaged. I'm at my very best when I'm learning a whole lot, when I'm challenged, when I don't know exactly how to do what I'm doing. And so I have to work hard to figure out, how can I be successful here? That's where I thrive. I thrive in that space when there's a big challenge and it's audacious and I'm trying to find where the walls are. So I'm trying to understand what the big picture is. And so if it starts feeling easy, and if I don't have interest, if I don't feel like I'm learning, if I can't articulate the learnings I'm gaining, then it's time for me to find something new to be interested in, something that I find challenging and interesting. And so that's about listening to yourself. Yeah, the size of a company might be part of it. Is there too many people here? Is this thing moving quickly enough? What am I learning? What am I taking away? Does this learning stack up to something I can envision myself becoming, right? These are the questions I ask myself weekly.
Every week, damn.
Right? Always, every week. Where am I at?
If you don't mind, I'd like to transition to understand you a little bit more. Some of the questions, even in the outset of this, you talked about being a proud father. I'd love to hear more about that and what that has meant in your life.
Being a dad, whoa. So it's kind of one of these things you can't really explain. You just kind of have to, you got to see it with your own eyes. But I'll say, I knew I wanted to be a dad. When I was 18, I was thinking about being a dad. I wasn't obviously ready to do that.
At 18?
Oh, I knew that. My family is a pretty huge family. Both of my parents have 5 siblings. And so I have more than 30 first cousins. And there's lots of very successful relationships. My parents just celebrated 45 years of marriage on Saturday, this past weekend. And so I have a bunch of great examples of people committing their lives to each other. And my parents are flirting with each other in front of their kids today, right? So I've seen a bunch of these things. And that love and watching them work through problems is something that I wanted that. I was like, that's what I'm trying to do. And the way I feel about my dad and my mother and my grandparents, and I have this spiritual feeling about them. I have these emotional, I don't know if it's emotional, spiritual, some sort of sense about the connection to my ancestors. And that feeling that I have, the connection that I have with my siblings, the way I see myself in them, the way I see myself in my father and my mother, I want to be able to gift that treasure to someone. And like, that is the thing I want to give to my kid is like, can I just give you the lineage of my heart, my genes, my blood? Can I gift you with this? Because to me, this is the immense thing, is like it is the root in the soil. This thing is is such a treasure, right? So that's the thing. That's why I can say I knew when I was 18. It wasn't because I was ready to have a kid or had any idea what it meant to be a father, but I had this sense about my ancestors and what that means to be connected to them and trying to connect someone through myself to them, right? So that's the thing that I want.
I appreciate you explaining that, and especially so elegantly. I was thinking that you was out there at 18 trying to generate baby mamas and stuff like that. So thank God that's not the case.
Yo, hey, there's enough of that out there. I don't need to add.
Okay, and how's the rest of, so you have your son, how's the rest of your family structured, and not just your immediate family, but like what's your social support circle? You kind of alluded to having 30 cousins and a pretty large family, but who else is around to support you and help you to be successful?
Yeah, so my family's pretty big. My mom has a bunch of sisters who are all very successful. My dad has sisters and some brothers, so some uncles and aunts in there. Lots of cousins. Almost all of them are in Arkansas. So I don't have a local community of family, of blood relatives. I mentioned music. Part of my community is musicians, and being able to explore, express, communicate on that level is something that is I cherish, and I consider it when you mentioned yoga earlier, do I do yoga? This is my yoga, right? So I consider it a support.
Are there any other organizations you've been a part of that have equally helped?
I founded a community organization in 2014 with some folks. My co-founders, Eric Osborne, Todd Bennings, Seth Stell, 4 brothers in Seattle come together. We start this organization called Here Seattle 2014. Here Seattle is an organization established to create community outside of the office for underrepresented minorities working in technology and creative spaces in the city of Seattle. So we started putting together events and bringing people together. And then we also started to work with some of the biggest companies in the world, Microsoft, Google, Zillow, F5, a bunch of other local companies, developing DEI programs. That community was over 3,000 local folks. So they came to us because they were saying, we are bringing people we might resonate with this. We're bringing people of color to the city of Seattle, and they leave because they don't want to be here. Yo.
I might resonate with that.
So Here Seattle was supposed to be and served as a resource for many people coming into this tech hub that didn't have a community outside of work. And we were successful, and we brought over 3,500 people of color together, and we were doing events on certainly a monthly basis, and some large events through the year, and building programming. That now defunct organization, we paused and stopped working on that right at the beginning of the pandemic, because obviously community organization, we were bringing people together in person, which we could not do, and also at least half the founding staff moved out of Seattle. Todd moved down to the Bay Area. Now he's in Atlanta, and Seth is in Medellin, Colombia. He moved out of the country, and so we stopped doing that. But that means that I have a large community of people of color that still remain in Seattle that I can lean on and talk to and build and continue to inquire and develop culture with in Seattle because of that organization that we ran almost 7 years here.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. I have a friend that's doing something similar now, and these things are needed. Something else that you said, the connection of musicians to yoga, and then feel like going out and finding your tribe is extremely important. And you're saying that musicians essentially is your tribe, and I think they're mine too. I'm slowly discovering this. Can you maybe speak more about like what music's meant to you, and even how like you've rised in the corporate arena, but at the same time still been able to stay hold of this love that I think you say you started at 7?
Yeah, that's right. Oh man, music. So music is in my family. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother is she's been like the minister of music at 2 or 3 churches in her town since she was 16. She continues to do that work even now. She will be 83 this year. Her mother, her mom, and her mom's siblings, they were all professional musicians in Chicago. I didn't learn that until I was in my late 20s. I didn't realize that was the case. On my dad's side, my dad is this active listener. So he's a guy that has like all these vinyl records. When we were growing up, I come from school. We watch an episode of Star Trek Next Generation, and then he put on some records. He'll be like, "Yo, check this record out." And my dad is an active listener, so my dad he doesn't just listen. He's like, "Check that out. That's the clarinet. Do you hear that bass? Do you hear that the baritone saxophone there? That's the hook." Like he's telling you what's going on, right? And so I grew up with like a natural education, like not a formal education, but a very natural education in music. And I'm obsessed, man. Like I need to play. I need to perform. I need to be writing and creating. And it's a space of great comfort and peace. It's a place of tranquility. It's infinitely reliable. I can at any point sit down at the piano for 10 or 15 minutes and I will be back at center. And it has been the case since I was a kid. It is a space of grand tranquility for me. When I moved to Seattle, one of the only ways that I was able to survive, and I didn't even realize how bad it can be here with regard to cultural diversity, it is not a very diverse space. But one of the reasons is because within the first 6 months of coming here, I had gained a community of musicians very, very early on. And which is one of the most diverse communities in Seattle, are people that are performing and playing music, which I think sheltered me in some way from the negative impacts you might encounter in corporate jobs, and certainly corporate jobs where there's a lack of diversity and certainly lack of empathy for the needs of those who come from diverse communities.
Well said, and a good way to end. If there's one last thing or things that you could leave the listeners with, what would that be?
Figure out what you want and believe in yourself, because you can have that. That's what it is.
Definitely words to live by. On that note, I think we're going to wrap up for today. I really appreciate you coming out, giving us your time, energy, words of wisdom, jovial spirit, and all of that. You also didn't mention in the podcast, but in addition to being a father, husband, musician, DigitalOcean guy, you're also a professor, and I know you teach in the evening, so this is an extra sacrifice for you. Really appreciate it. I'm sure the listeners appreciate this also.
Yeah. Hey, it's a pleasure.
That wraps our conversation. Many thanks to André for sharing his story and for the gems of knowledge he dropped during our discussion. I end each show with listener-submitted inspirational career quotes. Today's submission I took from the book André recommended, Mindset by Carol Dweck. The quote reads, "Why waste time proving over and over how great you are when you could be getting better? Why hide deficiencies instead of overcoming them? Why look for friends or partners who will just shore up your self-esteem instead of ones who also challenge you to grow? And why seek out the tired and true instead of experiences that will stretch you? The passion for stretching yourself and sticking to it, even or especially when it's not going well, is the hallmark of the growth mindset, which allows people to thrive during some of the most challenging times in their lives." Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. And leave a rating and review, as it really helps to amplify the message so others can discover this content and benefit from it. And we'd love more user-submitted quotes. I plan to read them at the end of each show. Instructions on how to submit those quotes are in the show notes. That's all for today's show. Thanks for listening, and until next time, peace